2 months ago, early impressions were calling Mortal Shell 2 the upcoming Souls-like of the year, a sentiment many still have on full release. Considering how bad the first game performed, I was skeptical, but after experiencing it, the reality is a lot more complicated. The sequel fixes everything about the first game and then some, but before you buy into the hype, there's a massive problem the game has right now. But first, let's start with Alright, so I think the best way to start off this first impression of mine is to talk about the combat, because the combat is built around aggression. And to further solidify this, they removed the stamina system of the game actually from Mortal Shell 1. I think that this removal of the stamina bar allows for a more engaging combat, because you really are just incentivized to swing as much as you can and try to get away with as little as possible. And so that's how the whole block parry dodge mechanic comes into play as well, because you try to thin the line between attacking and defending so that you're able to kill the enemies as fast as possible. You'll be carving through hordes, staggering enemies, allowing you to riposte them. And man, this game has a riposte animation for basically every enemy, and it's all pretty sick. You'll be able to unlock different weapons and sidearms, but also abilities from these things called tar stones. Now, using these abilities or using these sidearms take resolve to fire, but resolve is only gained through melee attacks, which further incentivizes this aggressive playstyle, where each swing is a split-second decision of trying to squeeze more damage or getting ready to defend. If you do happen to die, don't worry. There is a form of revive system in the game. Whenever you die, your body leaves the shell, making it unable to use any of your abilities. But if you're able to stack enough damage through melee hits, you are able to gain back your shell and basically revive. Now, the damage threshold for being able to revive does increase with each down, so you will have to rest again at a local beacon. Overall, I think it's fun and fluid, and the removal of the stamina bar adds a lot more hidden depth, making the game way better compared to Mortal Shell 1. On top of the combat being better, build creation is one of Mortal Shell 2's greatest strengths. There are 8 shells in total. You have Teal, who is more of the assassin type. His abilities let him go invisible, allowing him to do massive damage from behind the enemy. But also, whenever he dodges an attack, it causes the enemy to take stagger damage. It really adds to that assassin playstyle, knowing that dodging, going for backstabs, and using fast weapons is the way the shell works. Now compare that to Smirt, who is literally just Dio. He can stop time and punch as much as he can, and once that time ends, all that pent-up damage is released all at once. Each shell is unique with their own separate playstyle and abilities and passives that allow them to take on a specific class fantasy. Now, to further differentiate these different shells, the game also has shell memories as a mechanic. These are just stages that allow you to get a better inside depth into who the character you're playing is. I briefly mentioned it before, but there's also a wide range of weapons that you can now use to create your own playstyle. So not only are there 8 different shells, but there are also 8 different weapons and sidearms. Now, if we do the math there, that is a total of 32 different combinations of firearms, weapons, and shells that you can mix and match to find what suits your needs. Now, you do have your typical greatsword, battle axes, and spears, but there are also some really unique weapons like the Axe Katana, which is a trick weapon. Its light attack uses dual-wielded short katanas, but whenever you use a heavy attack, it transforms into an axe. I also just love the idea of having sidearms. The sidearms themselves are not only just weapons that you can use and make builds around, but it also just breaks up the monotony of just spamming M1. The nail shot is the first sidearm that you get, and it's basically just a shotgun on demand. It was pretty fun, and I used it for quite a long time until I found the loot. The loot was pretty funny. Its whole gimmick is that it doesn't do that much damage, but it instead turns enemies into allies for a short period of time, which was pretty unique. As a side note, you can also use it to make other NPCs dance, which I found to be pretty funny and shows that the developers really care about the details in this game. Now, like I mentioned before, tar stones affect the way that you play by giving you different passives and effects that change how your build itself works. For example, you can use specific tar stones that affect your attack speed, maybe your range damage, or gives you higher critical chance, all really depending on what you want from your own build. But alongside that, there are these things called seals. Now, seals, they change how you defend yourself. For example, the Infinite Seal is basically how the parrying in Dark Souls and Elden Ring work. You break the enemies more efficiently, but if you miss, you're left completely undefended. Now, the Untarnished Seal is more similar to what Lies of P has. You can block incoming attacks with your weapon, but you also have the ability to Perfect Guard, which deals not as much break damage as the Infinite Seal, but good enough that you'll be able to stagger enemies between 1 to 3 Perfect Guards. Now, Vatra's seal is actually what the game first had with Mortal Shell 1. How this seal works is that you're able to harden your body to withstand the next attack. In actual practice, what this means is charging up a big attack, hardening, letting the enemy attack you, and then unhardening to land your attack. It's pretty unique and it's honestly a fun experience. The only thing about it though is that it does have a cooldown, which means you can't just use it on demand like the other seals. One small comment I'd like to add here too is that weapons don't clip on terrain, which is so nice after just playing Lies of P. Essentially, build creation in this game is really fun, unique, and reminds me a lot of Warframe, allowing you to pick and choose between different frames, different playstyles, and different ways of tackling the problem. Now, moving on to world design. The world design in Mortal Shell 2 has a dark and gothic feel to it. Now, it's not my personal favorite, but I still can appreciate the different types of dungeons, the different types of villages, castles, and all these different landmarks that you go to. I'll touch more on this later, but getting lost in this game is really easy, and that's what makes exploring it so fun. You might plan to use treasure map to find a specific weapon, but the way to go there is full of different enemies and points of interest, making the journey way more interactive and immersive. As you travel around the map, you'll spot nearby beacons, which act as checkpoints. These beacons are places where you can level up, change shells, and travel back to your home base. But usually there's also a mini dungeon inside of these beacons. A bit of a sidetrack, but it's also cool how you can adjust the level to whatever you want, really, with the Slayer Seal and Night Mode. Now, the Slayer Seal does make the game easier, but Night Mode, on the other hand, changes the game entirely. It adds different enemies to old places, increases their health and damage, and even unlocks Night Mode exclusive dungeons that you can only go through with the mode active. Now, you don't have to play through the game on night mode to experience this. You can just turn it on whenever you're near a dungeon or a specific merchant that's only available during the night. And I also just personally like how the game looks in night mode. It really makes me want to play another playthrough with only night mode being on. Now, we've talked about a lot of good that the game has, but there are some distinct problems that the game has right now that's pushing me from saying that the game is as good as it can be. While I did mention in the world design that getting lost is basically a part of the game, that can be a good or bad thing. Some players might feel overwhelmed with the amount of options and different places you can go, as each branching path can really lead to 3, 4, 5 different dungeons, making you wonder if the path that you picked was the right one. And there also seems to be a pretty bad checkpoint pacing in the game. And what I mean by that is that the beacons can be pretty sparse. You can revive in the beacon, do 1 to 4 different dungeons, and die on your 5th one, and not find another beacon. It's really frustrating because you know this is not something that needed to be in the game. Dying at a certain dungeon should not mean that you have to walk from the beacon all the way back to the dungeon, which can take up to a minute to 2 minutes, which is not that much, sure, but if you die at least just once in a dungeon, it does tend to wear you down quickly. Now, this point about pacing and runbacks is usually fine for the average Souls-like player. They're usually used to it through the other games, and it's not that uncommon to see a mechanic like this. But to a much more broader audience, someone who's never touched the Souls-like and is getting into this, then it's something to really think about, as you'll be having a much more longer and harder time going through the game, more so than other players, which means more dying, which means more run back, which means less time fighting and more time running. Another thing I wanted to touch on was enemy variety. Now, if you're exploring the same part of the map, then you will usually, most of the time, encounter the same different enemies that you've been encountering for the past 5 to 10 dungeons. Enemy variety in this game is limited. Now, I personally find it fine, but I do feel like I do need to point this out because it's also just one of those things that can wear you down when you go through an entire dungeon only to fight your 7th Grisha. Lock-on this game can also be very finicky. Sometimes you'll be able to switch between enemies really easily, but then others, it's almost impossible. And with the ability to use sidearms and basically having to aim them at these different enemies, it can also affect your gameplay. Now, on top of all these different problems, the game on release also just had a lot of bugs, and it still does, including crashes, character models not loading in correctly, bosses disappearing into outside the arena, and honestly, a ton of smaller bugs as well that I don't remember, but I know it happened. So yeah, I think it's rough on the edge overall in terms of the gameplay experience, because while the combat is fun and while the build creation is unique, all these different issues makes me hesitate to really give the game the top dollar it deserves. For $50, it's by no means $60 to $70 range that AAA games are asking for nowadays, but it is pretty damn close. And for a game this expensive, I would expect some of these bugs to be fixed relatively soon. And even as of one day after release, the devs have already reached out and have released the balance patch, fixing many of the bugs and issues the game has. So really, like I said, I think the game is good, but it still has some issues that is causing it to not be as enjoyable as it should be. Which is why I think that you should get the game a couple of weeks after release or on a major update if you're really excited about it, or if you just want to leave it for later, just maybe wait for a sale. If you're interested in Fallout, then you should check out my video where we go over what life is like in Fallout's most evil vaults. And man, some of them can be pretty crazy, so be sure to check it out.